I left my hometown to fight for my country. And when I came back, my own blood had sold everything my family built, like it was just dirt under their boots. That's the thing about betrayal. It never comes from your enemies. It comes from the people you trusted with your heart. My name's Logan Barrett, 43 years old, the kind of guy you wouldn't look twice at in a hardware store. Scuffed boots, worn-out flannel, a scar over my left eyebrow from a life that never believed in safety nets. I spent 5 years overseas working construction contracts in dangerous places, places where loyalty meant everything, because losing it could mean losing your life. When I finally made it back, all I wanted was a piece of peace, a place to rebuild the farm my father left behind. A home. But peace wasn't what I found. Instead, I drove down that old dirt road, the one lined with pecan trees my grandfather planted, and found nothing but for sale signs staked in the ground like tombstones. No one called me, no one warned me, no one cared. "You blink once," I muttered, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles went white, "and the people you thought were family sell you out for pennies." I pulled up to the old homestead, or what was left of it. The farmhouse was gone, the barn flattened. Even the swing where my sister and I spent countless summers was ripped from the oak tree, leaving nothing but a ragged scar in the bark. I stepped out of the truck, boots crunching on gravel that didn't feel like home anymore. And I just stood there. No yelling, no fists through drywall, just silence, like a man standing at his own funeral. Maybe they thought I wouldn't come back, I said out loud to the empty fields. Maybe they thought I'd die out there and save them the trouble. I didn't cry, didn't curse. I just stared across the hollow shell of the land that once held every good memory I ever had. Then I did the only thing left to do. I turned around, got back in my truck, and drove into town, where the real war was going to begin. Because one thing about men like me, you can take our land, you can even take our blood, but you'll never take our will to fight. The ones who stole from me thought it was over. They had no idea. Thank you so much for staying with me through this first part of my story. If you felt the weight of betrayal and the quiet fury it brings, please like and share this video. It helps the story reach others who might need to hear it. And I'd love to know, where are you watching from today? Drop your city in the comments. Maybe in my next story, I'll set the scene in your hometown. The town hadn't changed much. Same cracked sidewalks, same faded banners on Main Street, same people pretending not to see you when it's inconvenient. I pulled into a diner at the edge of town, the kind of place where the coffee tasted like burnt hope and the chairs wobbled when you leaned wrong. I slid into the corner booth, ordered a black coffee from a waitress who didn't recognize me or pretended not to. Didn't matter. I wasn't here for small talk. I was here because I needed to sit somewhere that wasn't soaked in betrayal. The coffee came, thick, bitter, scalding. I took a sip without flinching. Across the room, two old men in trucker hats were arguing about fertilizer prices. A teenager behind the counter scrolled through his phone, ignoring a blinking "order up" light. Life went on. As if my world hadn't just caved in. You leave for 5 years to make a better life, I thought bitterly, swirling the coffee in my cup, and come back to find the better life was never meant for you. I didn't pull out my phone to call anyone, didn't storm into the county clerk's office to demand answers. Instead, I took a napkin from the dispenser, pulled a cheap pen from my jacket pocket, and started making a list, one name at a time, one parcel at a time, no emotions, no second guessing. "If you can't trust blood," I whispered under my breath, writing carefully, "trust ink." The list grew. Names I hadn't thought about in years. Cousins who used to share firecrackers with me on the 4th of July. Aunties who used to slip me extra pie slices when Dad wasn't looking. Now, they were just bullet points on a napkin. Collateral. Damage. I folded the napkin once, slid it into my back pocket. Paid for the coffee, tipped heavy. Not because the service was good, but because some habits are hard to break. As I pushed out into the afternoon sun, I felt the shift inside me. Small, almost imperceptible, but real. The kind of shift that happens when a man stops hoping for the world to do right by him and decides to do right by himself instead. "They closed the door on me," I muttered, squinting, against the sun. So now I build a door they'll never be allowed to walk through. I didn't need confrontation, didn't need screaming matches or courtroom battles. All I needed was time and patience. The kind of patience a man learns in places where every day you come home breathing is a small miracle. Walking back to my truck, I passed the old hardware store, the one where my uncle used to run tabs for the whole family. It was closed, boarded up, fitting. The old world was gone, and from here on out I wasn't asking permission to build the new one. I drove the back roads out of town, windows down, the scent of cut grass and dust filling the cab. Somewhere between the faded barns and the endless rows of soybeans, the memories crept in, uninvited but relentless. I could still see it. The old farm, before the world got too complicated, the paint on the porch peeling in the summer heat, the smell of fried chicken drifting out of the kitchen window, my cousins racing barefoot through the fields, hollering like we were chasing something that actually mattered. I remembered the Sunday barbecues, big, messy affairs with too much food, too much laughter, and not enough plates. Uncle Joe burning half the burgers, but swearing they were extra seasoned. Grandma Barrett sitting on the porch swing, a mason jar of sweet tea balanced on one knee, smiling at the chaos like she owned every second of it, and Dad standing with his arms crossed, surveying it all like a general inspecting his troops. He used to clap me on the back and say, "Family's like a field, boy. You plant it right, you harvest it good." I believed him, believed it deep down in the marrow of my bones. Back then there were no betrayals, no property lines drawn in blood, just names carved together into the same tree trunks we used to climb. But somewhere along the line, the harvest soured. Somewhere between the high school graduations and the funerals, the laughter got thinner, sharper. I remembered the first time Uncle Joe brought up selling a few acres. "Just to make ends meet," he said, rubbing the back of his neck like the lie itched. I remembered Dad's face hardening, his voice flat when he answered, "Once you sell your birthright, you can't buy it back, Joe." Nobody argued that day, but now I saw it. The seeds of betrayal sown right there under the heat of a dying summer sun. Maybe they thought they were doing the smart thing. Maybe they thought they were surviving. Maybe they forgot survival. Without honor is just another kind of death. Pulled off onto the side of the road, killed the engine, listened to the wind sigh through the tall grass. It was quieter than I remembered, less alive, like the land itself knew it had been sold out by the very people who were supposed to protect. I sat there a long time, fingers drumming on the steering wheel, trying to reconcile the ghosts of the past with the cold reality of the present. Finally, I whispered into the silence, "You didn't just sell land. You sold the blood that built it. And once you do that, no amount of Sunday barbecues or porch swings can bring it back." The past wasn't coming to save me. The only thing left to do was bury it deep enough that it couldn't haunt me anymore. I started the truck. The engine growled, low, steady, like it understood. I pulled back onto the road, the dust rising behind me like a funeral procession. The boy who once ran through these fields was gone. The man driving into the storm ahead, he wasn't coming back empty-handed. The thing about betrayal is, it doesn't crash through your front door waving a red flag. It comes slow, silent, like termites eating through the beams of a house you thought was solid. Looking back, the signs were there. I just didn't want to see them. The first crack showed. Up the summer before I left for overseas, Uncle Joe started talking about opportunities. Real estate, he said. Developers looking for farmland to turn into something called luxury retreats. "It's just dirt, Logan," he told me once, flicking the ash from his cigarette onto the porch. "You can't eat loyalty." I laughed it off then, thought he was just blowing smoke like he always did. But maybe he wasn't joking. Then there was the night Aunt Marie hosted that big family dinner, the one where everyone was there except Grandpa's chair, still sitting empty 6 months after the funeral. The laughter sounded wrong, forced, and when they talked about the future, no one mentioned the land. No one mentioned staying, just jobs in the city, better schools for the kids. "Moving up," they called it. I remember catching my cousin Clint sneaking glances at me across the table, nervous, twitchy. I thought maybe he was hiding bad grades or a girl he wasn't supposed to be dating. I didn't know he was hiding a knife. For my back. Another memory slipped in. The day before I shipped out, I walked the boundaries of our land with Dad's old survey maps tucked under my arm, just a tradition, a way to say goodbye. When I got to the far north fence line, I noticed something odd. Fresh markers, new stakes in the dirt, not the old ones. Grandpa hammered down decades ago. The paint was still bright, the numbers too clean. They're just fixing the property lines, Clint told me when I asked later. Making it official. Grandpa would have wanted it. I nodded. I wanted to believe him, because the alternative, that they were carving up my inheritance like vultures before the body was even cold, was too bitter to swallow. At the time, those moments felt like mosquitoes, annoying but harmless. Now, they felt like warning shots I was too blind to dodge. Every late phone call that ended too quickly. Every document they asked me to sign just to keep things moving. Every hug that lasted a second too long, like a goodbye they were saying before. I even knew I was leaving for good. You see what you want to see, I muttered, gripping the steering wheel harder, and I wanted to see family. But family built on convenience isn't family at all. It's just an alliance, and alliances break the minute the money gets good enough. Driving past the old church, I caught a glimpse of the graveyard, where 3 generations of Barretts lay under simple headstones. I wondered what they would have thought of this mess, of how easily blood can turn into business. Maybe it's better they weren't here to see it. Maybe it's better I saw it late, because now there was no hesitation. The gloves were off, the ties were cut, and the fight was mine alone. I didn't kick down any doors, didn't scream through the streets demanding justice. That's not how real wars are won. Real wars are won by men who know how to stay quiet and prepare. The first thing I did was drive 3 towns over, far enough that no one would recognize my truck, far enough that the gossip wouldn't reach the wrong ears. Walked into a dusty little office with a flickering fluorescent light, a real estate lawyer whose name hadn't been on a billboard in 20 years, the kind of guy who knew how to file paperwork fast, cheap, and invisible. I laid out the situation, keeping my voice steady, no anger, no bitterness, just facts. He nodded once, slow, like he'd seen this story before. "You're not looking to sue," he said, tapping his pen against a legal pad. "You're looking to own." "Exactly," I said. "No lawsuits, no family brawls in courtrooms, just quiet acquisition, one piece at a time. We set up a shell company first. Nothing fancy, just a set of initials and a P.O. box in a neighboring county. No ties to the Barrett name, no red flags." From there I hired 2 more locals, a property scout and a fixer, both hungry enough to work hard and smart enough not to ask questions. Their job was simple. Find out which parcels my cousins still owned. Find out who was desperate. Find out who would sell if the price was just painful enough. Meanwhile, I opened a separate bank account. Nothing tied to my old name. Every cent I'd saved overseas. Blood money from years of hard work. Went into it, no debts, no mortgages. Cash talks louder than family feuds. And when you're the one holding the cash, you don't need to shout, you just need to wait. "Let them think they're winning," I muttered, signing the first round of documents. "Let them think the fire's gone out." Because the thing about vultures, they only circle when they think the body's already cold. At night I stayed in a rented cabin off the highway, cheap, drafty, with a busted heater and curtains thin enough to see the headlights passing by. I didn't mind. I wasn't here for comfort, I was here for war. Every evening, after a long day of fake inquiries and strategic lowball offers, I'd sit at the battered kitchen table, mapping out the land, plot by plot, acre by acre. Each one a piece of home being stitched back into my hands, each one a reminder. You can steal what's mine, but I'll take back what matters, and I'll make you pay rent on it. The best part? They never saw it coming. They thought they'd buried me overseas. They thought the land was just dirt. They forgot one thing. Dirt remembers. And so do men like me. I didn't expect to find anything bigger. Not really. In my mind, it was simple. They sold me out. I'd buy them out, end of story. But stories, like rot, always run deeper than you think. It happened on a rainy Tuesday. I was sitting in the dusty lawyer's office going over another batch of deeds we'd quietly scooped up. Halfway through, Mr. Klein, the real estate lawyer, paused, frowned, flipped a document back and forth, then slid it across the desk toward me. "Something's not right here," he said, tapping the signature line. I leaned in. At first glance, it looked fine. My name scrawled across a transfer agreement, dated 2 years ago. Problem was, I had never signed it. The signature looked close. Real. Close. But the slant was off. The loop in the B was too tight. "That's not mine," I said, voice low and even. "I didn't sign that. I wasn't even in the country." Klein nodded slowly, face grim. "Then someone forged it, and if they forged one, there might be others." The next few hours blurred together. Phone calls, pulled files, cross-referencing dates, notarizations, property movements, and every turn, the same ugly truth stared back at me. The people I grew up calling cousins, aunts, uncles, they didn't just sell what wasn't theirs, they fabricated the right to do it, forged my name, filed false paperwork, lied under oath. It wasn't just greed, it was premeditated theft, the kind that could put a man in prison, if anyone had the guts to drag it into the light. I sat back in the worn leather chair, staring at the ceiling fan spinning slow overhead. I thought betrayal would feel hot, like fire in your veins. But it didn't. It felt cold, precise, surgical, like a knife. Slipped between the ribs while you were hugging them goodbye. "It wasn't an accident," I muttered, the words tasting like iron. It was a plan, and they had counted on one thing, that I'd stay gone, that I wouldn't notice, that I wouldn't fight. Well, they were wrong about a lot of things, and they were. About to find out how wrong, I had a choice to make. I could drag them into court, spend years wading through lawsuits and appeals, tearing the family name into bloody rags, or I could stay the course. Quiet, relentless. "You don't need a gavel when you hold the deed," Klein said quietly, watching me. And he was right. Owning the land meant owning their future. No arguments, no mercy, just cold, hard facts inked into county records. I stood up, sliding the forged document back across the table. "Let's finish this," I said, voice steady. "I'm done playing checkers, it's chess now, because this wasn't about getting even anymore. It was about reclaiming what should have never been stolen and making sure the thieves could never forget who took it back. Revenge isn't about rage, it's about patience. Precision, timing, like laying down a trail of breadcrumbs and knowing exactly when the wolves will come sniffing. I didn't confront anyone, didn't slam fists on tables, didn't send angry letters, or call late at night just to hear them squirm. No, I let them feel safe, let them think they'd gotten away clean. Because arrogance? It's the softest spot on any armor. The first move was simple. I had Klein file a series of anonymous purchase offers, low enough to seem like bargains, high enough to stir greedy hearts. Every offer came from a different shell company. No fingerprints, no trail leading back to me. We targeted the borderline parcels first, the small bits of land my cousins didn't think twice about flipping. They thought they were gaming some big city developer. They thought they were running the con. You never. "See the trap," I muttered, signing another offer. "When you think you're the one holding the leash." Within 2 months, we controlled almost 70% of the old family holdings, quietly, legally, efficiently. Every acre brought back without a single raised voice. Then came the bait. I had Klein leak a rumor, just loud enough to reach the right ears, that a major highway expansion was being proposed nearby. Land prices would triple overnight. They said, anyone holding property would be rich beyond their wildest dreams. The sharks smelled blood. The cousins who had laughed at my absence started clawing at each other for control, trying to buy back parcels they'd sold, taking loans they couldn't afford, promising titles they didn't even own anymore. It was beautiful, watching them scramble, watching them tear each other apart for something that was already slipping through their fingers. They played checkers, I thought coldly, while I was playing chess 5 moves ahead. The final nail came when I instructed Klein to quietly call in a series of debts, loans secured against their remaining properties. Loans they had signed, in their own names, with their own arrogance, never suspecting who held the note. One by one, their assets defaulted. One by one, the land slipped from their desperate hands into mine. I didn't show up to the auctions, didn't gloat at the courthouse. Steps I just waited, listened, And when the dust settled, I owned every square inch of what once belonged to the Barrett family, every field, every fence line, every memory. And as I stood on the ridge overlooking the valley at sunset, hands in my pockets, wind tugging at my sleeves, I whispered into the gathering dark, "You thought you buried me, you thought you planted me, but all you did was sow the seeds of your own downfall. The trap was set, the game was over, and the land had come home. Truth doesn't need to shout, it just needs to stand still and let the liars stumble into it. The collapse didn't happen in a day. It happened piece by piece, like a slow avalanche starting high above where no one's looking. It started with foreclosure notices. One cousin found a bright yellow sticker on the front door of his half-built McMansion. Another got a certified letter from the county office. A polite but brutal reminder that unpaid taxes don't just disappear. Word spread fast in towns like ours, and the Barrett name, once spoken with pride over Sunday dinners and high school football games, became a punchline whispered over gas, pumps and grocery store checkout lines. The mighty Barretts losing land faster than they can sign their own names. Some old rancher chuckled at the diner one morning. I sipped my coffee and said nothing, because the best victories, they don't need parades, just patience. It wasn't long before the questions started flying. How had the family lost so much so fast? Why were new deeds showing names no one recognized? Who was pulling the strings? They looked for someone to blame, and when they couldn't find an outsider to hang it on, they turned on each other. Cousins who once shared Christmas stockings now slung lawsuits across courtroom aisles. Aunts who once baked casseroles traded. Accusations in parking lots. The proud Barrett legacy crumbled under the weight of its own greed. And me? I watched. Not from the courthouse steps, not from the center of town. I watched from the high ridge above the valley, the place where my father once taught me to shoot tin cans off fence posts. The place where Grandpa used to say, "This land's yours, Logan. It'll outlast any man who ever tried to break it." And it had, so had I. The final blow came quietly. One by one, the remaining holdouts signed over their properties, sometimes to cover debts, sometimes just to walk away from the shame. By the end of the season, the Barrett land, the real Barrett, land was mine, legally, irrevocably, completely. No fights, no blood, just ink, paper, and the cold arithmetic of consequences. Standing at the property line that evening, boots sinking into familiar soil, I let the wind carry the last fragments of anger out of my chest. They traded heritage for dollars, I whispered into the twilight, and found out too late. You can't buy it back once it's gone. The valley stretched out before me, silent, endless, forgiving. It didn't judge. It didn't care about the bloodlines or betrayals. It was just waiting. Waiting for someone who remembered what it meant to belong, and I did. God help me, I still did. They came to see me, eventually. Not all at once, just a trickle. A cousin here, an aunt there, faces I used to know like the back of my hand, now cracked and weathered by regret. They didn't storm the gates, didn't demand justice. They just showed. Up, small and tired, carrying words they should have spoken years ago. "It wasn't personal, Logan," one of them said, twisting a ball cap between his hands. "It was just business." I stood on the porch, arms crossed, the setting sun at my back, and I didn't raise my voice, didn't curse, didn't even step off the last stair. I just looked him in the eye and said, "Family ain't supposed to be business." Simple. As that, no lectures, no speeches, just truth, heavy and clean, like a hammer dropped on an old cracked stone. Another cousin, Clint, showed up a week later. He stood at the property line like it burned to cross over. Called my name once, voice cracking, held out a crumpled paper, some half-baked offer to buy back a few acres he once called worthless dirt. I didn't even walk down to meet him, just tipped my hat against the sun and said loud enough to carry, "You sold your future, Clint. I'm not the one who set the price." He left without another word. Good. I didn't need apologies, didn't need tears. Forgiveness isn't something you owe to liars. It's something you earn, and some debts are just too big to pay off. The land was mine now, not just on paper, in spirit, in blood, in sweat poured into every acre they abandoned for a few cheap paydays. That night, sitting alone on the porch swing, I watched the stars climb one by one into the ink-black sky. No champagne, no parties. Just a quiet kind of finality, like the last nail in a coffin. No one wanted to admit, was built by their own hands. And as the wind shifted, carrying the scent of rain on fresh-turned earth, I whispered to the empty night, "We're done. I buried the past right alongside your promises." The story didn't need an ending with fireworks. It needed an ending with silence. And sometimes silence says everything you ever needed to say. Revenge was never the end game. It was never about destroying them. It was about reclaiming me. The seasons turned. Summer slid into fall, and fall bowed to the bitter breath of winter, and I stayed. Built, not with anger, not with noise, but with the quiet, stubborn hands of a man who knows exactly what he almost lost. The house I rebuilt wasn't grand. Simple farmhouse, white siding, wide front porch, tin roof that sang when it rained. Inside, bare wood floors and a fireplace that smelled of cedar smoke. No marble countertops, no stainless steel. Just home, the way it used to be, the way it was meant to be. Every morning, I walked the fields at sunrise, boots sinking into soft mud, the mist curling low over the pasture. Sometimes I'd see a deer bolt through the trees. Sometimes I just listened to the world breathe. And somewhere along the way, the heavy knot in my chest loosened, not all at once, not with fanfare, just one quiet morning after another, until breathing didn't feel like a battle anymore. I bought a dog from the shelter, an old hound with scars on his muzzle and a limp. In his back leg, named him Rusty. Felt right. We were both a little banged up, both still standing. "You and me, old boy," I said, scratching behind his ears. "We ain't survivors, we're builders." Rusty wagged his tail like he understood. Maybe he did. Some nights after supper, I'd sit on the porch with a cup of black coffee, watch the stars come. Alive overhead. No noise. No company. Just the steady pulse of crickets in the fields, the low hoot of an owl in the trees, the wind whispering over land that no longer judged me. Because it knew I had come back, and this time I wasn't leaving. Sometimes I thought about them, the ones who had sold me out, the ones who had thrown away their inheritance for a fistful of cash. But thinking about them didn't hurt anymore. It didn't matter. "You don't heal by reopening wounds," I whispered one night into the cool dark. "You heal by growing where no one thought you could." And I was growing. Maybe not tall, maybe not proud, but strong, steady. Like the oaks my grandfather planted, deep roots, unshakable and unseen. This was my land, my story, my rebirth. Not because I burned everything down, but because I built something better, out of silence, out of scars, out of soil that remembered me when no one else did. And in the end, that was enough. It was always enough. Thank you for staying with me until the very last chapter of this journey. This story wasn't just about loss, it was about rebuilding, about finding your own peace even when the world tries to tear it away. If Logan's journey meant something to you, please like and share this video with someone who might need a reminder that starting over is not a failure. It's a victory. Now I'd love to hear from you. Where are you watching from today? Drop your city in the comments below. I might set my next story right in your hometown.